Oftentimes when you think of reality TV show, you don't really think of getting deep and into people's story and learning the lessons they've had in life that can impact you as a business owner. In today's episode, we are joined by a prior guest and one of my favorites to follow on the internet. It is a guest who has been on Married at First Sight and Bachelor and shares about the trajectory of her life since then, how she's turned it into business, a personal brand, and the lessons she's learned. We get a little heavy in topics on therapy and trauma, so just a little disclaimer on that, but I think it's a really, really important episode for everyone to listen to, whether a business owner or not. It will definitely help you in all areas and all stages of your life. So welcome to Real Biz Talk. Hey y'all, welcome back to the Real Biz Talk podcast. I have a previous guest, one of my favorite entrepreneurs and mom business owners on the internet with us today, Jamie Otis. You'll recognize her probably from season 1 of Married at First Sight and season 16 of The Bachelor. That's cool and fun. I loved watching you on that, Jamie, but I really absolutely love the way that you're just showing up online. And I think it's such a breath of fresh air with like body positivity, talking and really sharing about the struggles of being a mom and handling everything and business. So thank you so much for coming back. I really appreciate your time.
Yeah, thanks for having me. You're always fun to hang with. So thank you.
We need to do it in person for real at some point if we're ever on the side of the country together.
Right.
So for those that don't know you, I mean, I'm a huge fanatic of reality TV. I've watched almost every episode of everything that I can get my hands on. So I know your background. Do you want to share a little bit how you got into the reality TV world? And then we'll move into the stuff you're working on now.
Sure. Yeah. So I was, I think I was like 22 and I had custody of my siblings. We lived in a little tiny trailer when I never watched like TV an awful lot because was studying to be a nurse. I'm a labor and delivery nurse. And obviously I had custody of my siblings. So I didn't watch The Bachelor. Of course, everybody's heard of The Bachelor. And then after I graduated from nursing school, I was like sitting down with a friend who was watching The Bachelorette. And I was like, what is this? And she was like, oh, this is, she's picking between all these guys. And I was like, wow, what a great gig. Like, how lucky is she? She gets to like choose between all these guys. And so, and then the commercial came on, like, if you want to date the next Bachelor or Bachelorette. And my friend was like, oh, Jamie, you should apply. And I was like, oh, I will. And so then I did. And oddly, I was never thought anything would ever come of it because I'm a girl from a trailer park and I had custody of my siblings. It's not like I have like my mom, had some issues. I didn't know my dad. So it's not like I was like this. I didn't think I was TV worthy, I guess. And then they picked me, and long story short, went on that show, pretty much made a fool of myself and was like, I'm never doing this again.
I disagree. You may feel that way. You ended up in the final 4. So you did end up taking him home.
No,
we won't even mention name. No? Final 4?
No. I made it like pretty far, but not the final 4, which was such a blessing because bringing him home to a trailer would be like with my siblings. I don't even have my mom was not around really at the time. And so that would have been.
They shared the story though. I mean, they really shared your story to show your humble beginnings coming on.
Yeah, I think that they had higher expectations for me. And I was like a deer in headlights. And I was just kind of I remember when we were like on a date, like a group date, or no, it was the rose ceremony. And we were it was definitely before the rose ceremony, we got to hang out, and so he grabbed me, and then there's cameras coming out everywhere. And I was like, oh my God, this is like TV. Like, what is this? Like, this is so weird. And the way he held my hand, I was like, oof, this feels like my grandma's holding my hand.
Oh, no.
It just felt so wrong. And so it was just all very strange, but it did set me up, I feel like, for success for my husband and my relationship now and Married at First Sight, because I became desensitized to having those cameras all around me. And so then it was less like, oh my gosh, there's a camera coming out of the blue. And it was almost like, oh yeah, that's expected. That's what happens. And so when I met my husband, I was thinking it was going to be entirely different. So I married my husband on the first season of Married at First Sight, like you said. And I was the way that it was approached was far different than, oh, you're going to get to, I thought, I was signing up for The Bachelorette. Turns out you have to actually date the Bachelor first to become the Bachelorette. Never got that far. but yeah, so then, but the biggest blessing behind being on The Bachelor first for me was that I think that I would have probably never, I don't know if I would have ever been able to hack like Married at First Sight if I had never been exposed to like, I guess, the TV world and the way that they literally like film your every move and you're like, whoa, like where'd you come from? And who are you? And why are you filming me? So it worked out in the end.
Well, of course, you guys are still married. I got to wave to Doug before we came on here.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
You guys are one of my favorite couples to follow. And it's because of the showing up. As you were just talking, I was thinking, Bachelor was like a dress rehearsal for Married at First Sight. And then, of course, I'm not going to give away this season. I think season 1 of Married at First Sight is my favorite season so far. Not just because you guys are on it, but I love the couples. I really do. But almost like all those are dress rehearsals for what you're doing now and kind of fulfilling this purpose, I think, that you feel to put yourself out there to encourage other moms and women. So I love seeing the journey of, we see people on reality TV that go and they create. I just saw Laura Airy, that married Airy. I can't even say her last name. She has a new clothing line and all this sort of stuff. And so I think oftentimes people think, oh, reality TV, they're going to go and have all these franchises. But I think what you're doing is so much more like grassroots hard hitting. And I love it. So thank you for showing up. Is it hard? I mean, do you think that being on the shows kind of helped lend to being a bit more transparent now, or kind of what is, and I guess I don't know what the question is. I guess, what is your motivation now? What has helped you to be so real?
For me, my whole life, which is something I'm really like working on in therapy, because my whole life I've just really, truly like wanted to just be loved and accepted, like from just my parents, really, like my mother, like, and then teach like anybody around me, because, my mom struggled with addiction. And so she would kind of always just push us off, and she tried her best. Like she really, truly tried her best. She had a really rough upbringing herself. And so, that's just the cycle, right? I'm sure my grandma had a rough upbringing. And so there's just a continuous cycle. But for me, I've always just wanted to be loved and accepted and like have friends and family. And I've always felt like I just really don't have a family. And so that was the whole point for Married at First Sight, really, was I was like, listen, I'm going to tell you like the skeletons that are in my closet. If you think you can actually find someone who will love me with all these skeletons in my closet. And turns out, when you start opening yourself up and sharing your skeletons of things that you think are so ugly and gross and no one will like accept you or approve you, first of all, it's like freeing, you're like, oh my gosh, like, okay, now I'm not hiding it. So you can either love or accept me. That I wish I knew when I was younger, because first of all, like my issues with my mother and like what happened with my mom, that has something to do with me. That's all on her. And that I always took that as my own personal, I always took that as like my own personal, I guess, issue, like, the fact, like my own, I don't know, insecurity, and that's really not, I mean, now that I'm almost, I'm in my 30s. So like, I'm like, geez, girl, like you were so young. If I knew a little girl now that had custody of her siblings living in a trailer park, I would give her the biggest hug and be like, you are doing great. Like, don't you feel like you're a piece of poo because you have a rusty car that like doesn't work half the time. And, like you shouldn't feel like a piece of poo because you are doing great. You are trying your best with what you have and you're going to get out of it. But, so for me, it was started by sharing the skeletons in my closet, like freely. I feel like on The Bachelor, they really forced it out of me and I didn't want to because I was embarrassed of it, but turned out to be amazing. Like after it was out there, of course I was embarrassed, like, because I thought that this was like, I felt like, I don't know, like an ugly witch or something. I don't know, like just like ostracized or something compared to all these beautiful girls on The Bachelor with their mansion homes. And you know what I mean? Like these girls all come from money and beautiful families and it just, I don't know. And so then I'm like, oh boy, like that's not me. But it just helped me realize, listen, like, first of all, I'm not the only one that, grew up in a trailer park who had parent like who doesn't know her father. I thought I was the only person who didn't know my father, and I had many paternity tests that turned out negative. And I've always felt so ostracized because of these like circumstances. Turns out I'm not the only one. And if you start sharing this stuff, you're going to feel lighter and freer to be you, but then you're also helping others to feel lighter and freer to be them. And then you can join together and be like, hey, you're an outcast. I'm an outcast. Great. Let's hang, and then you don't feel like an outcast so much anymore. So that's kind of my whole reasoning. Also to just be real, because it's so hard to be fake. Like, it's like keeping up with the Joneses. Like, God bless the Kardashians, but like, I just like, I can imagine the stress level. Like, girl, it's okay. Like, I think Kim Kardashian now is like taking out her implants, and I just want to be like, girl, I love you. Like I hope you love you, and you're okay whether you want your implants in or implants out. Like, you're beautiful for so much more than your body and your appearance. And I think that this world is just, it's just wild. And and that's why I think I felt so outcasted, from the beginning. So I'm like, well, geez, someone's got to show up and just be real. And so I guess that's kind of what I've been doing.
And you've created a community around it. And I think, as you were talking, I was thinking, and almost kind of like flashing before my eyes was all these different movies and stories of, there's a reason that Hollywood has underdog movies, right? People root for the underdog or those that feel ostracized, because there are more of us out there that have gone through either a rough upbringing and or traumatic events. I mean, you've been very public about, loss of your son and trying to get pregnant. And, and I love that you mentioned therapy. I want to come back around to that. But I think that one of the things, definitely those of us who are trying to show up, whether you're trying to create a personal brand or a business, you're afraid of polarizing other people away. And as I'm getting older, I'm nearing 40. I don't know if I just have less F's to give at this point in my life.
Yeah, for real. I get it.
Things you've gone through. I don't want the people that want me for the things that I wanted to be in high school and college. And I want, if they're not going to show up on the most imperfect of days, then what's the point? And it's just, you would think, even I had cancer at 20. So you would have thought I would have had this whole epiphany, 18 years ago when I was 20 years old. But no, we're conditioned in society to try to be accepted. And that, that's one of the hierarchy. You want to feel loved, like you were saying before, and needed. But I just think that, and I have a question for you here in a second, but I just think it's so important that we push out of the comfort zone as much as we can. Don't damage yourself in the process, but by putting it out there, what community can you build around to lift yourself up and lift others? But what tip would you give someone who's like, oh gosh, that's like horrifyingly scary. I don't even know how to put myself out there.
Honestly, to bring it back to therapy, if you're ever like so horrified and scared to share something about yourself or like your truth, then find someone, a safe, like, this sounds so strange to say, but like, I feel like a little therapist doing this, but like, find a safe person in a safe place to talk about these things first, so that you don't have to go out on this big public platform. I mean, for me, I kind of had no choice because, like, for example, like when I lost my son, I'd already announced it on the Today Show with Kathy Lee and Hoda. And so there was no like pulling back from that. Like, it was, I was in my second trimester. I thought everything was good. And so then that led me to want to start sharing my pregnancies far earlier, because like, how unfair is that, all these women have to wait, and then you still have a chance that you could lose your, but the point is that then you don't have support, like if you have to wait to like the whole point is to wait so that no one knows that you're even pregnant. So when you lose it, you can just suffer in silence. And that just doesn't, to me, I'm the kind of person that I love people and I like to be around people, and I don't know, I feel like I want support from people. And so it was like a blessing from God. Now that I'm older, at first it was like horrific because it was hard, but then it turned into be such a blessing that all these women who had gone through loss were reaching out to me any way they could, like on Instagram, on Facebook, on my website, like everywhere, just pouring love into me. And I'm like, I could cry, like probably because I'm emotional anyways today, but like, it's like, it was a very beautiful thing for me because I don't have my mother didn't know nor care, she's just kind of in her own little world. So I didn't have support like that. And it came from these strangers on the internet, really. And so then I wanted to share more love and support to these strangers on the internet. And then these strangers slowly become like, sometimes I make friends with them because I'm like I said, I've always just wanted like, a big family and like lots of friends and and I don't have that at home. So I'm like turning these Instagram followers into my real friends. But
what a world we live in now though, right? Like you can turn on your phone and be connected with friends. As you were talking, I was thinking about my mom had lost my brother. We're talking way before internet even existed. And they lived overseas because my dad was military. And I can't imagine like how lonely that was. The time, they had to suffer in silence, whether it was loss of pregnancy or any other trauma. So what a time we live in to be able to turn on electronic and get support. So on therapy, I know you mentioned it on your social media about marital counseling. I don't necessarily want to go into details. I just really want to throw out there for those listening, whether personal or in business side, how I have found I wish therapy was required for everyone from like the get. I feel like we all, whether we had a good upbringing or traumatic upbringing, we all need help. And so having friends is great, but also having professionals for me I have seen a growth personally and professionally by committing to therapy and not using the excuse of, well, I don't have time, because that's easy for me to say with 5 kids and businesses and you're just as busy, especially with your travels and everything going on. How do you stay on task to make sure you're committed to therapy? Because I've seen you talk about it and kind of the growth that you've gotten from it.
Honestly, therapy has like save my marriage for real. And so when you find someone that you feel safe enough to talk to about these, like all like the kinks and all the warts and all the things, you will make time, because you leave that therapy session. A lot of times it can be very like overwhelming if you've never done therapy, because you're really pulling up, some stuff, but you leave it regardless feeling like you have, maybe sometimes you feel like you have a plan, or you have even just that support that I was talking about. Like, I don't have I feel like a lot of my friends can go to their parents, like even my sister-in-law, like she goes to her mom over absolutely everything. And I really don't have that. And so if you're someone who doesn't but what I've realized, and I always thought, like I said earlier, like every mom, like every little girl went to their mom, and like all my friends had their mom, and I'm like, but not every little girl has that. And not every little boy has that either. And so when you can find someone, I'm like, I like joke often and say like, I have to pay people to like listen to me and my problems. I'm like, I will pay you, but will you listen to me and help me try to sort through this, please? But for, it's worth its weight in gold though, because when, after you're done with the therapy, like not only do they hear you out, they're also like an outsider perspective when it comes to marital things. So like, if I was talking to his parent, like his mom, well, they always side with their son. Always. They say, well, my son. Yeah. And then if I was talking to my siblings, who I'm very close with, they would tend to side with me because I'm their sister. And so, having someone outside the box who's actually licensed and knows how to kind of like delve through this stuff, you probably think I'm like have an ad coming up for some therapists right now, but it's just genuine. Yeah, no ad involved. It's just genuinely like therapy is just, and I would share my therapist's name, but I'd be scared that I wouldn't have time to see her anymore.
What's funny is I've been bringing up therapy. I really committed in the last few years, right before pandemic, had some things happen. And I was like, it's finally time to fix all my issues. Right. And so I've committed to doing it. But what I have loved the most about going to therapy is, I can talk to my family, my friends, my team members, all the things you just mentioned, though, they're pretty much always going to side with me. Sometimes they'll call me on my shit, but I really enjoyed that. A couple of weeks ago, my therapist was like, you just need to sit down and shut the fuck up. And I was like, what? I'm paying you to talk. He was saying it lovingly. He was meaning to quiet my brain. Like, he's like, when you're lost hiking, you don't keep walking, right? And so if you're lost and overwhelmed, he's like, you just need to sit down and shut the F up and quiet your mind. And I was like, I'm already doing that on the business side. Why is it like I feel like I'm an intelligent person. How is it I could figure that out for business, but not personal, or vice versa? It's exactly what you said, like having an objective person because they have no dog in the fight other than, helping you. And assuming
Mm-hmm.
you have the right person, right? I think sometimes I
Right.
had to go to a couple people to find someone I jived with. But yeah, so I feel like when I share that with people, are like, oh my God, your therapist says it. I'm like, but that's also my personality. And it sticks out for me and it gives me a visual that I need. And then I know that's like the
Mm-hmm.
person that can work with me.
Yeah, and that's a really profound advice because it's so true. When you're out hiking or if you're driving someplace, you don't just keep driving aimlessly. You have to stop and like redirect yourself. And honestly, to bring it back to like the top of our conversation, you were asking me like, oh, what do you want to promote? I'm like, I have nothing to promote. I'm literally sitting here right now in my own life, trying, like stopping and just trying. We have been traveling and, we have a podcast. We paused our podcast because we've just had so many things happening. And it's like, I think for us and our family right now, we were going through, we sold our house, we started this RV road trip. We were going through really hard times with our marriage and also trying to grow a family and then wondering, is this the right time to grow our family? But then also the maternal, like the biological clock, like ticking because I'm 36 and I'll be 37 in June. And so I'm like, geez, like all these things. But at what point do you just stop, just stop it all and just live for a minute and just breathe and see like all the blessings that you have around you, appreciate those. And then decide where do you want to go? Like this life, I think sometimes in life, and this is like about a business, but like this is the other side of the business of any business. When you get like so overwhelmed with your business, like, or many businesses that you have, or just regular life in general, it is so important, like your therapist said, to just stop and to just like see, because sometimes I feel like in life, we tend to just keep, like we wake up, we just do the same thing, without even thinking. And it's like, wait a minute, you get this life to live however you want. You get to choose where you want to go. And if you don't realize that, you're going to be 80 thinking, why did I stay in that job I hated? Why did I not try for this next baby, even though it hurt my heart every single negative pregnancy test? Why did I not cancel all meetings so I could go to my kindergartner's class performance? Like I missed out on so much because I just kept going and going and going because that's what society told me to do. And so I feel like that's profound advice from your therapist, and I'm going to take it for my own little life, like to feel like,
and be like, see, I am listening.
yeah, and I'm sharing with others, and it's helping.
It is.
Yeah.
It's funny you said that about the podcast, because the other side of it too is you can, people listening and watching and be like, oh, I'll take the advice, I'll slow down. But there's always, especially when you're very driven like we are, in the back of our mind of, are we going to let someone down? Are they going to think negatively, or are they going to judge me? And I chose to take off the podcast this summer. And then we decided to switch moving to video. But I took off so I could be with the kids. My oldest son is about to graduate. He's a senior this year. So I've been in the whole, oh my God, it's your last like 30-second Sunday till you leave type of like every week there's something new I'm finding. But the other day, I actually had two different people who mentioned to me, so are you bringing your podcast back? And I 100% believe that it was good intention. They just enjoy the podcast. But where my mind went was, oh my God, I've let them down, or oh my God, they think negatively of me. And then of course our publication schedule got pushed back because of school and then COVID and just life has just happened. And I even this morning, as I was prepping for it to come on here, I had to remind myself that this is my timeline on my personal and business side, right? Like, no, I think people enjoy the podcast. I know we got great feedback from your last episode as well, but I don't think they're necessarily chomping at the bit and biting their fingernails waiting for me to publish it. So it's almost, with also, having a therapist, I think it's helpful on the business side, having like a business coach or someone that can just say, it's like almost giving me permission, not that we need it. I know that sounds kind of weird, but permission to not be so hard on yourself. But I remember the last week when someone said that to me, I was like embarrassed. And I'm like, what am I embarrassed for? I'm standing up and doing the thing, took the time off that most people don't have the courage to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And you're like those counting down the Sundays with your kid, like that's your last summer with your first baby that you just, so you're allowed. And I think that, I don't love there's this new culture now about like not working or something. I don't know. I heard about it. Mm-hmm. Do you know what I'm talking about? Like where these kids like don't work because unless so like, I'm like somewhere in between. Like I'm not like, you gotta work. I mean, also like if you don't have a job and you have no purpose in life, then you're going to just get depressed. Like, I'm sorry, but you gotta contribute to society, not only for society, but for your own well-being. However you want to do that, but like sitting around playing video games all day because like that's like the cancel call. I don't know if it's cancel call. I don't know what it is, but I'm like, oh, that's not going to be good for your soul. But
No.
the hustle, like that you and I grew up like and have clearly adopted because of all the things that we're doing, that's also not good for your soul. And so it's like, where is that happy medium? We're all trying to figure that out.
Yeah. Well, and the problem that I kind of see with not just my son, I mean, his high school kind of got thrown off with pandemic. Like he was turning 15, 16 during it. So it kind of got all askew, driver's license,
Yeah,
working
that's kind of
and all
sad.
that. I know. I feel really bummed that he didn't get the true like high school experience. So we're trying, we're going to try for it with high school, the rest of high school and college. But I definitely see it. I think some of it has to do, we're talking about it's great to have this accessibility of other women and moms online to connect with and have support. But I think a lot of these kids, oh my God, I sound so old. They're kids these days. But they're seeing like we do things online, but they also didn't see the 20 years before where we were working a job, putting in, paying our dues. And I'm not saying, like you said, we don't need to be on that end of the spectrum of hustle, 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 but there has to be a good in between. And I think that's the beauty of if you're inclined, and I think most people watching this, if you're inclined to create your own business, that's the beauty of it. And, I always start with my coaching clients of, you would think with an MBA and all I do, we would jump right into analytics and this and that. And we actually pause and I say, I want you to define what your real life looks like now and in 10 years. It sounds so like mystic, but we want to work from there and reverse engineer back to do our business. And it could change, right? Pandemic upended everything. And I wasn't working my normal hours because I was doing virtual learning with 5 kids. Oh dear God, please never send me back. It was horrible. And I'm not a teacher of children. And I know that that's a weakness. I tried my best. But my point with that is just, it's not so much this hustle, 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 make the money. You said it before, keeping up with the Joneses. And I know it sounds so cliche, but those listening, I really want you to pause and rewind the last like 4 or 5 minutes of Jamie and I talking, because I can't emphasize to you, especially if you're newer in business, please from the jump, find your in between too much hustle and not enough, and really define what you want. Because what ends up happening is so many people, and Jamie, you speak to this a lot, they end up online and they're super polished and they're upset and they're not authentic and they're unhappy, or they're coming to me, they're burnout. And I'm like, because you're trying to be perfect. You're not showing up. You're not creating the community that you want, and anyways, that's a whole soapbox, but I'm really passionate about helping women, especially moms, create the business and the life that they want. And so we're in this era of all this information accessibility, but we have to learn to temper that. We have to kind of scale ourselves back so that we're self-aware with our life circumstances and what we really want.
Totally agree.
And on that note, no, I'm just kidding. I'm saying, no, advertisement comes. No, I'm kidding. I'm just seriously, that is the whole mission of the podcast in a nutshell. I think my biggest takeaways from here, and I love how you show up, and we mentioned it before, talking about therapy, leaning in. I think one of the key things I enjoy about your social media is that you really lean into the body positivity and you have these connection points. People may not really notice that, but it's a really good marketing strategy for you, which it may not seem like a marketing strategy. You're just being you, but it translates so well to what you want to do and the things I've seen before. Do you have anything coming up, or you mentioned right now just taking a pause on business stuff and kind of focusing on family, or kind of what are the next steps from here?
Yeah. So for us, I feel like I'm like the hiker I'm not lost. I'm like I'm very happy with where I'm at, but I'm burned out. I am so incredibly burned out right now. And it's so interesting that I'm even doing the podcast, but I felt like, we had a good relationship. And so I was like, okay, why not? But, I had another podcast, and props to you for being so organized and really, truly like having all your schedules and whatnot, because this other podcast, she not so much. And so now, I'm just so burned out, and I'm learning boundaries right now and trying to just I'm trying to just heal from just constantly being on television and sharing my whole life, either through The Bachelor, I guess, and then straight into Married at First Sight. And then, I've just been on television, which is also like amazing. For this girl from the trailer park who's been on television and I've been on like film my whole life for the past like 10 years, which is so awesome. But now I feel like I'm learning, especially with kids, like how fast they grow, that like I need to pause and I need to not just take the next shiny thing that's being thrown at me. And I'm really thinking through, I've like turned down some different opportunities for businesses. Cause when you're young, well, for me, I took everything. I was like, wow, I'm so lucky they're even thinking of me. But now I'm like, okay, wait a minute. Does this really align with who I am and what I want in the future? And do I even have time for that? And if I take this, will I have time for my family? Because the number one thing for me is to be with my kids. Obviously that's not realistic 24/7, but that is why as I said, top of our interview, is that I'm a labor and delivery nurse. The reason I'm not in the hospital as a labor and delivery nurse right now is because I couldn't, you have to be there 12 hours. You don't get to leave. You can't leave. If something happens to your kiddo, you can't leave at a drop of a dime. You have a patient whose life, is in your hands. And so you can't. And so the flexibility is why I have kind of created my own podcast and we are going to be relaunching our YouTube channel, but and sharing still on Instagram. Yeah, thank you. No, but there's no timeline. I have no news to tell you that, oh, it's coming and I'm so excited. This is literally just like, for me right now, I think it's just so important to just sit back and to just really not just take every shiny thing or try to constantly like keep up, but like to just take some time to breathe. And, we are trying to grow our family. And so, that's like a whole other conversation. And so I feel like, in order to get what is most important for me in life, which is just to grow my family and to be with my family, I have to take a little time to breathe. So anyways, that's what I'm doing. And I think that honestly, for anybody who's, whether they're new or they don't have a business or they have had a business forever, I feel like that's like the most solid advice to ever. I wish I had heard it earlier, like way earlier. Yeah. Like take some time to breathe. Or if you're in that job where you don't feel fulfilled, don't stay in it, because man, it's not like, don't wait for retirement. Oh my goodness. Like what if you don't even make it because, you don't know. And so that's an awful way, I think, to live life, is to just wait for retirement. I mean, you have so much life to live between now and retirement. Do something that you enjoy. And even if it means you're making less money, but you're happy, who cares? Like do it, drive the rusty car, because who cares? Like it still gets you from point A to point B, and, and then you're happier, do it like while you're going from point A to point B. So that's my thought.
Well, I know, I love it. And see, this is exactly why I wanted to have you. And I really do appreciate your time. I understand you guys have a lot going on. I'm just someone you've met on the internet, but I have to say, I'm really proud of you for like the setting of the boundaries, the scaling back, because I know how difficult that can be, especially when you're looking at, I'm on this wave from being on TV. There's all these opportunities I could have. And I think it really shows the mark of the growth that you've committed to, your personal, your family growth. And so I love it. I think that
thank you.
was the best lesson out of this entire conversation. The therapist mental health, is a piece of that as well. But it is, I know many people that still sit in therapy or have business coaches, they get advice, but they're so afraid to take that next step. And so I think it's really incredible that you keep showing up and showing us what's possible. It's rejuvenated me for sure to fix my schedule, because I've been really thinking of things to take advantage of the last year that my oldest son is at home. So, well, thank you, Jamie. I appreciate your time so incredibly much. If you guys are ever on the East Coast in your RV, please feel free to swing by. Our kids and run them up together. But guys, I will drop all of Jamie's social media stuff. Her Instagram is my favorite. It's one of the only ones I check on a routine basis. So it'll be in the show notes.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course. And then don't forget to jump into the Real Biz Talk podcast group on Facebook. We'll be chit-chatting in there, and I'll also drop Jamie's links and new stuff that she has coming up. But again, Jamie, thank you so much, and I appreciate your time.
Thank you so much, Rachel.